This is practice exam 2 for Excel. So the first step is to take fuel estimates, select these cells, merge and center. Then the next thing is we're going to make this point size 16, and so on and so forth, change all of the formatting as specified. These over here are supposed to be centered, and you can click further on alignment, and we're going to say wrap text, and we're going to bold it. So we're going to click on the bold, and then the background is going to be orange accents without accent 6. The foreground is going to be white. Okay, so similarly over here, this line over here, I suppose was supposed to be this foreground and background, and once again bolded and centered and wrap text. Okay, so then we need formulas for each of these elements here. So fuel required. The amount of fuel required depends on the type of plane. So you see here's a Boeing 727, a DC-9, and so on and so forth. These values here on the bottom in this table are in alphabetical order, in ascending order, so we could use a VLOOKUP for this purpose. So I'm going to say equals VLOOKUP. So usually we've seen examples of using VLOOKUP in based on numbers. Here we're going to use it based on text. So VLOOKUP based on the plane type. This plane type is going to change as it goes from one line to the other, from one row to the other. So that's going to be a relative reference. Comma. Then we need the table array. The table array is going to be from Boeing 727 until gallons per hour. The column index number here is going to be the column index number here is going to be, since it's fuel required, we're going to select, this is column 1, column 2, column 3, so it's going to be column 3. So that's how much gallons per hour. In order to get the total number of gallons, that's the fuel required, we're going to need to multiply this by the total flying hours. We'll choose flying hours over here. That's going to give me an answer of 3025. Now, in terms of reserve fuel, that's going to be the percent of flying, the fuel required, multiplied by the percent of fuel required for reserves. So if we look at the percent of fuel required for reserves, that's going to be right over here, 0.2. That is in this particular cell. But we're always going to be referring to this particular cell as going to be an absolute reference. So we're going to say equals fuel required times percentage of fuel required for reserves, where H19 here is going to be an absolute reference. The holding fuel is going to be a similar type of thing. It's just going to be the fuel required times percent of fuel required for holding, which is 10% instead of 20%, and we'll press F4 again to make this an absolute reference. Total fuel is going to be entirely relative references. It's going to be fuel required plus reserve fuel plus holding fuel. Now that's going to give me the total fuel. I can take that total fuel and I can multiply it by some price per gallon. Now it depends. There's a threshold number of gallons for price break, so we're going to need to use an if to see if we're greater than or equal to this amount. If we are, we're going to multiply it by the reduced price per gallon. Otherwise, we're going to have the normal price per gallon, and that's what they say over here. If you look at the costs, if the fuel required reaches or exceeds the threshold number of gallons, then it's going to qualify for the reduced price per gallon. Otherwise, it's going to be the normal price per gallon. So that's just an if. So we go in here. The cost is going to be equals total fuel. That's a relative reference, times, and then we need to know the cost per gallon. So the cost per gallon we'll select using an if. So if this total fuel, G4, is greater than or equal to this threshold, where the threshold, H16, is going to be an absolute reference, because we're going to copy it to other cells and we don't want it to be dragged down. So then I'm going to choose the reduced price per gallon, and again, absolute. Otherwise, the normal price per gallon, and again, absolute. That's going to give me the cost. I'll select all these cells and I'll drag this down, and I did something wrong because you see over here I got NA. So presumably the VLOOKUP messed up somehow. Let's take a look. Yeah, you see over here in this VLOOKUP, so this VLOOKUP A16 to C18 was a relative reference. It should have been an absolute reference. We'll just change it over here. And then I'll select all these down, and now we got numbers for all these. Then the next thing, well, you would put your name here. So here I'm putting in my name. Totals. So the total number of flying hours is going to be equal to the sum of everything above me. The average value is going to be equal to the average of everything above me, not including totals. And the maximum is going to be equal to the max of everything above me, not including totals, etc. Once we have these three values, you select these and you drag across, and you get these values also. Okay. Now we still want to format these, so presumably let's see how the formatting goes. Does it say enter formulas in the spreadsheet? Okay, it's I don't see offhand. I'll format cells B11 to H13 to bold, B11 to H13 basically means all of these totals over here. So Control B, or you click on bold, and we've now bolded it. Format the cells to so certain cells are going to be 0 decimal places with the comma style. So for example, D4 to G13. D4 to G13, basically all of these numbers are going to be numbers, but they're going to be with 0 decimal places afterwards. So you go to a number, and it's going to be a number with 0 places after the decimal. In terms of the cost, so the cost is going to be currency with 2 decimal places. So we'll select over here currency with 2 decimal places, and so on and so forth. These cells, H19 to H20, this percentage is supposed to be as a percentage with 0 decimal places. This price per gallon is supposed to be currency with, and that's fine. And so that's how you would format all of that. And that's the first sheet. The second sheet, we're trying to make a chart. What kind of chart? Oh, oops. We're supposed to also insert a thick bottom border for certain cells. I'll just choose one of them, but you're supposed to do for all of them. A3 to H3. A3 to H3. So we want to have A3 to H3. So right over here, so at the bottom of each of these, and presumably over here as well, we want to have a thick bottom border. So right over here, not just a bottom border, but a thick bottom border, and you see we have that thick bottom border there. A10, etc., for all of these, I guess. This over here, we'd also want a thick bottom border, and so on and so forth. Okay, the chart. So we're going to make a copy called sorted, and we're going to sort them by planes in ascending order. So we go over to fuel estimates. We'll say move for copy. We're going to create a copy right before charts. It's going to be fuel estimates 2. We'll rename this to be sorted. And what do we want to do for sorted? We want to sort by planes in ascending order. So we go in here, all of these numbers here, we go to the data tab, sort by plane in ascending order is A to Z. So I say OK, and now it's sorted. Apply the number filter to the cost column for the planes to show only rows where the cost is less than or equal to 2,500. So we're going to apply a filter, and the cost is supposed to be less than or equal to 2,500. So we'll say here a number filter that it is less than or equal to 2,500, and I say OK, and there we only have these 2 planes. Create a custom footer for the sorted worksheet that contains your name on the left and your email address on the right. So that's what we'll do. A custom footer will presumably be over here, and we want to say 1 moment. We want to say that we'll choose over here, let's say with this page setup pop out, we'll go to header and footer, and we'll say custom footer, that one section is supposed to have my name, and the other section is supposed to have my email address. And I say OK, and I say OK, and now I have a custom footer just for the sorted worksheet. Okay, and then we're going to save this and move to chart. The chart is supposed to use a scatter with smooth lines and markers chart from A2 through E12. So A2 through E12 seems to be all of the numbers in here. So this is a multiple data series instead of a single data series. So I go to insert, and then I'm going to insert a scatter chart. What was the type again? Scatter with smooth lines and markers. So scatter with smooth lines and markers, and it makes it into this chart. Insert above the chart the title study time and quiz scores. So above this chart we're going to say chart title above the chart, and the text is going to be study time and quiz scores. Insert the x-axis title time in hours. So axis titles, primary horizontal is the x-axis, and we'll say title below the axis, and the axis title is supposed to be time in hours. Oops. And the y-axis title is going to be test scores, rotated title. So we'll say here axis titles, vertical axis of the rotated title is going to be test scores. Move and resize the chart so it's going to fit within the worksheet. Move over here to this appropriate box, and then we click in the corner, drag, and we resize it. Perfect. Next up is an FV. So we're going to type the appropriate formula using the FV function. So we go here to FV. So assuming you deposit $2,000 in a saving account that pays 7% interest compounded annually, so that's the APR as well as the effective annual rate. How much will you save after 2 years? So there's no dividing by 12, multiplying by 12, etc. This is the 0.7% interest compounded annually. So I'm going to say equals future value, and we need to put in the rate. The interest rate annual is going to be this before. The number of periods is going to be 2. The payment is going to be 0. The present value is going to be this amount that you're putting in is going to be a negative value since it's money flowing away from you. And we don't need a type because we're not making a payment, but we could put in arrears, we could put a 0 in there, and we get this number, 2028. How about if it was compounded daily? So if it's compounded daily, you're going to divide by 365, the number of days in a year, is going to be the interest rate, the effective periodic interest rate per day. And then the term is not going to be 2, but it's going to be 2 times 365. So we go over here, equals FE, and again the rate is going to be this number, but this time divided by 365. The number of periods is going to be this number times 365. The payment is again going to be 0. Present value is going to be this negative number of the deposit, and the type is going to be 0 because it doesn't really matter. And that's going to give me an extra 10 cents. See, instead of 0.10, it's going to be 0.20. So that's the FV. For PMT, this is an interesting one. I think we could use text formulas to select out the number 30. In other words, within my formula, I could say equals right. Right, GHT is going to give me, or actually left should be. See, I could say left of this and give me 2, and that's going to give me the number 30. And if I would copy this over, it could give me a 15. So I could write a single formula over here in this cell using the 30 or using the 15. And that would give me the 30 and the 15 instead of having to write it in 2 different cells. Or else I could just hard code the number 30 and the number 15 in each of these places when I need to use it. Now let me just look for a second at the instructions. Enter a formula in cell B6 using the payment function to calculate the monthly payment. So in other words, this is going to be divided by 12 and multiplied by 12 if we have 30 years and 30 years. So with a yearly interest rate, that's an APR given in cell A6. So you see over here, starting interest is 7.5, but we're always going to use the one that starts over here. So I'm going to type as follows. The way I'm going to get the 30, just to write a single formula for it, I'm going to say equals left of the number immediately above me. This I'm going to use a mixed reference. So in other words, I want it to always be in the same column as me, but in a different. Sorry, this is always going to be the same row 5. But it's going to be whatever column, the same column as me, so it's going to be relative in terms of that. So, comma 2. And so that way, as I copy this down, we're always going to be getting the number 30. Okay, so that's going to select for me this number. Okay, so I could put that in my formulas, or else if I want, I could type. Well, let's use this for now, and I'll show you the final formula later. So what we're going to do is we're going to say PMT, give me the payment, where the rate is going to be this interest rate to the side. And this interest rate is always going to be the same row as me, but it's always going to be the first column. So it's going to be $A, but just the same number 6. It'll copy. Okay, so that's A6. And then the number of periods is going to be this 30 that I selected times 12 is the n per. Oh, actually, we want to divide this also by left of b $5, comma 2. So we divide by the 30, and we divide by the 30 times 12, and we multiply by the number of years times 12 to get the number of months, because it's compounded monthly. The present value is always going to be that amount borrowed. That's going to be an absolute reference, and it's money flowing towards me, so it's going to be a positive number. Future value is 0 because it's going to be paid off. The type is going to be in arrears, so I'll put in a 0 because it's at the end of the month, and that's going to give me $288.35. And so just again, the rate is going to be the 7.5% divided by 30 times 12, and then the n per over here is going to be 30 times 12. The amount borrowed, the PV, is going to be D1. This should be an absolute reference. And then 0 is the future value because it's paid off, and it's going to be paid in arrears. It's going to be 0. I can then take this formula over here and I could drag it down, and it'll give me all these numbers. And I could also drag it to the side, because what's happening here is I'm changing these formulas. I'm choosing 15 years as my number. So then if I wanted to get the difference between one and the other, I would just say equals this number divided by this number. And that's the difference. And then I could drag this down as well. So that's a neat way of doing it. And that way, if I had 30 years, 15 years, 10 years, etc., I could always pull it out from the column title. If you wanted to, instead of making so many relative references, we'll just hard code in each of these places. We don't need to make this a mixed reference. We could just use A6. And this over here, instead of left B52, we'll just put in the number 30. Instead of this left B52, we'll put in the number 30. And then, in this single formula that I'm typing, I'm only using relative references and absolute references, no mixed references. Oops, just put in this parentheses here. And similarly over here, I'd have to rewrite it. And this over here is going to get a hard-coded parentheses 15 times 12. And this over here is going to just be a 15 times 12. And then I have a formula in here, which I could apply to all of these. And I have a formula in here, which I apply to all of these. And then I don't end up with any mixed references. Oops, this over here could now be just a relative instead of a mixed reference. and everything works out. Okay, so that's the end of this test, I think. Let's just take a quick look. Yeah, that's the end of it. So next up, we move to the last, to practice test 3.